Welcome back, freaks, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks. This is the show that does a deep dive into the extended cinematic universe of Charles Band, be it Full Moon Features, Empire International Pictures, Torchlight, Moonbeam, any of them. We hit them all. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, coming to you from Flatbush, Brooklyn. And which one of my band bros is taking the ride with me today?
Well, this is Steve Guntley from Austin, Texas here. Very excited to talk about this one. This is the episode all about time-traveling cross-dressers, sexy nerds, and horny Terminators. That's to say, this episode is about test tube teens from the year 2000. That's right. We're getting into the Torchlight era here today, which means we're getting smutty with it.
Yeah, Steve, I don't know. Can you hear that?
What is that? Oh my God. I suddenly feel the need to whisper carelessly.
Yeah, it's getting sexy up in here, so
oh boy,
watch out, everyone.
All turned red. People can't see that, but we just got some very evocative lighting.
All right. Enough of that.
That is the pop song that sounds the most like a softcore porn theme. Like, I wasn't trying to do that, but like, man,
I was pretty sure it started 4 times in this movie.
Oh yeah. I kept hoping for it. I'm like, oh no, that probably exceeded the the rights to that song would have exceeded the budget for this 10 times over.
So this is Test Tube Teens from the year 2000, which was allegedly released in 1994, but I got conflicting information that it was 1993.
So it was shot in 93. It was intended to be the first movie released under the Torchlight label, but it got pushed around and it wound up being the second one released coming out in 1994.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Steve, because I know what that first movie that was released was. What is your history with Torchlight as a property within Full Moon, or just with Skinamax Softcore as an entity?
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about this because like I promised in the last episode, we are not going to be going into much extensive details about our particular teenage interest in some of these movies because I don't think anybody wants to hear about that. But softcore is such a fascinating little subset of movies. It's kind of like something that's not really for anyone, but it's also for everyone. It's kind of a really weird way to approach erotica.
That's a great way to describe it. It's this movie in particular. It's like it's too hardcore for curious adolescents, but it's too tame and silly for horny adults.
Yeah, and it's also just like, yeah, it's very tame. I think tame is the right word for it. For me, this movie, I've never seen any of the Torchlight movies, I don't think. I think I may have seen one of the Femalien sequels at one point, but I don't know if it was still Torchlight at that point. But my whole experience with movies like this, again, I'll keep the gory details to a minimum, but when I was a teenage boy entering that phase of life, when you and I are both old enough that we existed like pre-internet, or at least, pre-internet pornography. So like we didn't really have a lot of options. You had to kind of work with what you had. And for me, our cable package, like we had a satellite cable package that would have pay-per-view movies, and they would show you 5 minutes of whatever pay-per-view movie you wanted before they locked you out and made you pay for it. So basically my entire puberty, my pubescent process was formed in those little 5-minute chunks of various softcore movies that were playing on some of the upper tier satellite channels. So if it didn't have anything sexy in the opening credits, then I was kind of out of luck. And a lot of them did not. So, this one at least had some like silhouettes, some James Bond-esque silhouettes of naked dancing ladies.
I was going to say, This movie looks like the beginning of Octopussy.
But again, when you're that age, you're not, beggars really can't be choosers. You work with what you have. So, so this movie, watching the beginning of it pinged a little bit of nostalgia for me, because especially with the opening credits, because I'm like, I've seen opening credits like this 1,000 times, and like, it's so goofy looking.
Yeah, you nailed it when you talked about nostalgia. Like, whatever we might say about the movie itself after this, there is definitely a nostalgia factor to seeing these low budget softcore movies. Now, the very first Torchlight release, Beach Babes from Beyond, which we will eventually get to, was a favorite of mine.
Was it?
And
okay, I've never seen it.
It was, and it was one of the movies that was on Cinemax or Showtime or something in the early 90s. And we also had, and I want to ask my parents, if they're listening, to just fast forward about 30 seconds to a minute, or I just want to apologize in advance. But when I was an adolescent, we had an illegal cable box, and it had one of those buttons on the back, which was like a de-scrambler. And so what my parents had done was scrambled, or it might have even already been naturally done this way, but they scrambled like the Playboy channel and the Spice channel, and everything had a channel number assigned to it, and those channels were blacked out. My friends and I, at age 11, 12, 13, figured out that if we flipped the button in the back of the box, everything went up a channel, and all of the channels that were originally scrambled came in on whatever the next frequency was, which was never perfectly clear, but clear enough. So we would flip the button and we would attempt to watch stuff on Playboy and Spice like a bunch of totally, normal 12-year-old boys do when they are sitting in a room together.
Oh yeah, no, I have to interject and just let our younger audience members know this is how bleak it was for us back in the 90s. This is what we had to deal with. Like, most of our erotica that we had to absorb looked like a cutscene from Society or something. Like, it's just all this whole scrambled mess of like, oh, I think that's a boob. Oh, okay, all right, I'll work with that.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about Society in a few minutes, actually. But I think I also, when I didn't feel like, watching something through the de-scrambled picture, I would definitely frequent Cinemax or Skinemax, as it is, its Christian name.
Colloquially known, yeah.
And Showtime and all of those channels, in addition to the much tamer version on USA Up All Night.
Yeah.
And I that was my gateway into a lot of the stuff. So a lot of softcore movies I either saw unedited on premium cable channels and was, interested in them, titillated, I guess, to some extent. And then I would see sort of the bastardized, edited for TV versions of them. But there was a charm of having the movie introduced by Rhonda Shear or Gilbert Gottfried that was missing.
Rhonda Shear. I was trying to remember her name the other day. Rhonda Shear. Thank you.
Oh yeah, Joe Bob, Monster Vision, really formative movies for me. But it would be doing a disservice to try and downplay I don't know if I want to say importance, but like just how big a fixture the softcore was to me as a developing adolescent, and just to people at large in the early 90s.
I mean, if you don't mind, we didn't have a lot of resources to dig into with this movie because there's just not a whole lot written about it. But I wanted to dig into a little bit about softcore as a genre and kind of how this came about. So for those who don't know exactly what we're talking about, because I feel like this is more or less a dead medium at this point, softcore porn is basically what is described as pornography with more artistic and maybe mainstream ambitions. So you have to go back to the 70s where pornography became like the hot new thing. They called this era porno chic. Movies like Deep Throat and The Devil and Mrs. Jones, they were playing in like cineplexes. They were playing down at the local bijou. You could buy a popcorn and go see it with your best sweetie. That's how they talked in the 70s. And so, it was this really weird time where these hardcore movies were making major money, and it was maybe a window of about 3 to 5 years before, ratings boards kind of cracked down on it. And so I think Triple X movies went back to their Times Square hovels, and other filmmakers were trying to find ways to maybe bridge that gap a little bit. And so that's when we got the idea of softcore. Some movies that came around that would be very sexually charged. They would have a lot of nudity. They would have a lot of simulated sex, but they wouldn't have any penetration or ejaculation, things like that. We wouldn't see any penises. Vaginas were okay. Penises were persona non grata all of a sudden. And so that's basically what we had. So we had some early softcore films like Emmanuel and from 1974 and Alice in Wonderland from 1975, which were both surprisingly huge hits. Like they were big crossover hits. And that's kind of also where Charles Band came from. Like he cut his teeth in the early 70s making movies that were capitalizing on this trend. So his first couple of movies were Cinderella, Fairy Tales, and Auditions, which were all softcore versions of public domain stories. And he'd even kind of flirted with it a little bit with Full Moon prior to this with the movie Meridian, which is kind of like a sexy Beauty and the Beast riff starring Sherilyn Fenn.
It is. And I know you haven't seen it, Steve. I've seen it. We'll talk about it soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so by and large, though, Charles Band is not like, for a guy who purveys in a lot of like low budget direct to video kind of schlock, he is not really like a lecherous guy. Like he kind of gets a little shy about sex and nudity.
No John Derek, this guy.
Not exactly. And thank God for that. Yeah, we don't need more of those. So he's always been like a little, like, I don't know, a little charmingly conservative about that. Like, and you'll notice, like, Full Moon movies obviously have plenty of sex and nudity. You know, I think I always think of Head of the Family as one of the ones that has like the heaviest content.
I can't wait till we get there.
That's such a fun one. But like, I think Charles Band always kind of viewed this more as a means to an end because it was expected, and it's not necessarily something that he feels very rabid about, which is why he was kind of late to the softcore game. You know, like for a guy who was kind of ahead of the curve with a lot of the home video market, he was late to this. And I think it was the 1992 release of Basic Instinct, which made more than $100 million at the U.S. box office and became this like firestorm of controversy. You know, Charles Band is a guy who has never met a zeitgeist he could not exploit. And so I think it's finally like, all right, fine. We got to get into it. Sexy movies are a thing now. We just got to do it. And that's where the label Torchlight Films comes from. Torchlight is the sexy TNA-focused subdivision of Full Moon Features. It only lasted for about 5 years. There's not that many Torchlight movies really to talk about, but we're going to be covering most of them as much as we can. I think Femalian is probably the best known one because that spawned like a series and it had a couple of actresses who crossed over. But this one is one of the first ones. Like we mentioned, Beach Babes from Beyond actually got the earlier release, but this one was actually the first one shot.
Yeah, he definitely was a little bit late to this, which is interesting to me because it seems like a model that works so well. When you look at Full Moon and Moonbeam, which we haven't touched yet, and Torchlight, it's almost like you got the corner marketed on everyone. You got the kids entertainment, you're aping off your kid blockbusters.
Yeah.
You have your Full Moon proper, which is just sort of your middle of the road, appeals to young people, but also young adults, and it's heavily rooted in genre movies. And then you have now Torchlight, which is your sort of adult fare. So it's a little bit interesting. Maybe it says more about Charles Band's more conservative tendencies that it doesn't really ever venture into hardcore. Like the movie that we're talking about today, Test Tube Teens from the year 2000, is very tame, very softcore, and it's almost like the sex in it is sort of an afterthought.
Definitely an afterthought. I think part of that is because of Charles Band's general squeamishness, and part of that is because of the director, who I'm excited to talk about. He's going to come up for us a lot. This is a guy named David Decoteau. David Decoteau. I always want to say Cocteau, but it's David Decoteau.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's a Decoteau.
David Decoteau.
I think that's how you say it. I think I've heard Charles.
That trips
Charles
off
Band
the tongue
talk about him in interviews before. So
David Decoteau.
We'll say
okay.
Decoteau now, and then if we need to be corrected, listeners, feel free, and we will adjust accordingly.
Yeah, Decoteau seems like a fun guy. He started off at age 18 working as a production assistant for Roger Corman, and then eventually he would work a little bit for like James Cameron and Wim Wenders, a couple of like pretty heavy hitters, before deciding to go into filmmaking himself. He got his first movie by Charles Band at the age of 26, and that's the movie Creepazoids, which we'll talk about. He also did movies like Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama, and Puppet Master 3, which a lot of people consider the best Puppet Master. I have not seen it, I can't say, but a lot of people hold that one up highly.
I will not give away my position on that yet, but I'm going to say a lot of people may not be wrong.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So as his career has gone on, Decoteau has directed more than 90 films in the last 25 years, all right? He turns these around very quickly and very cheaply. Lately, he's been focusing more on his own erotic sub-label, which is called 1313. That's directed towards gay audiences, which I think is probably more appropriate for him. There's a funny anecdote in Charles Band's autobiography where he said some crew members came to him to talk about Decoteau and some of these erotic films that he's making. Like, not in any kind of shameful way. They were just saying, like, you should probably just know these movies are getting pretty gay. Which is like pretty fun. And I think you can feel some of that even in this movie. I think this movie is much more interested in filming male bodies than it is in female ones. And I think it has kind of a rudimentary understanding of what people find erotic in general. So, you know, I think that seems to be more his niche. And I think, you know, to be clear, like, I think it's totally fine that it's like oriented towards gay audiences. I think that's just not likely who was renting this movie with like bikini babes on the cover of it.
Yeah, there were more oily abs and male butt cheeks in this movie than I was anticipating.
Like, I don't know how they like. I don't know how they shined that man's butt so much. It looked like a
shiny.
It looked like a tan bowling ball. I'm just like, wow. That's,
you know
when
Homer sticks his head in the Shino-Ballo machine? Like,
yes,
that's what this guy's ass looked like. It was pretty intense, and yeah, the way his body
stuck it in the polisher at the Slimeball Bolorama. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
there it is.
It was a holdover prop. Ooh, just like all the holdover props from Trancers 3.
Yeah, absolutely, and subspecies even. I don't think we even mentioned in the subspecies episodes. Those little critters were designed for a different movie, and that movie never went. So they just like, oh, okay, here we got creature designs. Use it in this. You know, they're nothing if not economical over there at Full Moon.
I think it's Puppet Masters 4 and 5 also. It's reusing some of the set and stuff too. Which they're nothing if not economical, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely. So this movie that we're talking about today has been released under at least 3 different titles.
God, so hard to find.
So the original title was Virgin Hunters. Then it was renamed Test Tube Teens from the year 2000, and then it was subsequently changed back to Virgin Hunters. And there's also apparently a cut that's just called Time Teens.
It's Time Babes.
Time Babes. Okay.
Yeah, and it was the strangest thing. So I was trying to find the movie. I looked both in the Amazon Prime Full Moon app and then on Tubi. And when I searched Test Tube Teens on Tubi, this movie Time Babes came up, and it was a picture of Morgan Fairchild.
Yeah.
And it was the same release year and the same exact IMDb description. Mm-hmm. And I said, this has to be the same movie. But the difference is that the cuts of them, because I went back and I said, just to be safe, I'm going to rent Test Tube Teens from Prime Video, which had a 74-minute runtime.
Yeah.
The Time Babes one has a 67-minute runtime. And so I'm not sure what was cut. They're the same movie. They have the same exact opening sequence, but with a different title card.
I'm willing to bet they cut the sex scenes. I bet if you tallied it up, there's probably about 7 minutes of sexual content in this. Maybe it's like just like a PG-rated cut or something.
Well, the sex scenes in this movie are long. You can listen to Inagata Devita from start to finish during some of these sex scenes. Yeah, I mean, it was,
nothing else to do.
Well, okay, so this was homework. You know what I mean? Like, we're obviously not 12-year-olds watching this to giggle. we're
No.
doing homework, watching this and taking notes on it and noticing
And some
things about it.
giggling.
And some,
Yeah.
well, but obviously some giggling. And
Not
some,
because
and
it's
some
funny
cringing.
necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
But, this is one of those watches where I was getting real, not nervous during some of the sex scenes, but they were going on for a long time. And I know I was in my apartment by myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was going to walk in on me and I was going to have to explain what I was doing. This is the type, you just don't want to get caught watching a movie like this. And
I was very upfront. My girlfriend and I watched it together, and
Like
not
good-
for any
like good
erotic
couples
sexual
do.
purposes. It was this movie is really not very conducive to a sexy date night.
Mr. and Mrs. Erotic American.
I mean, yeah, this. I think everybody involved in this movie is a little ashamed of it. You can tell because Decoteau used his alternate name, Ellen Cabot, which apocryphally this is the name of an old girlfriend from high school, or at least that's what he used to claim before he came out. So I don't know.
I thought it was
exactly where
just
that name
Alan
comes from.
Smithy.
Yeah, right. It should be Alan Smithy, but yeah, Ellen Cabot is his version of Alan Smithy. Yeah. So and the book by Dave J that we cite very often that came from the video aisle has a very small chapter on Torchlight. Like it was a very kind of non-important element of the full moon life cycle ultimately. And it just feels like nobody was really very excited about any of the movies they were putting out.
I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying right now, and I think it is really interesting. Although I will say there are a couple people who I think give pretty decent performances, like who are sort of up for the material and recognize what movie they're in. But it is funny because I do feel like, in hindsight, this movie is not something that people, especially Morgan Fairchild, look back fondly on. But and also the people in it, like you said, a lot of them seem like this is something that they're going to look back on and be ashamed about, or they just give that energy, which is really weird because I don't know. Did you get a chance to watch? It's on YouTube, the Torchlight Video Zone for this movie.
No, I didn't watch that.
So I watched the Torchlight Video Zone to this movie, and you would think by the way that the cast and crew talk about this movie that they had just made Fitzcarraldo or something. Like, it's crazy because I'm like, man, that does not come across in the finished product. Like, Morgan Fairchild talks so wonderfully about it. Brian Bremer, who is also from Society.
He plays Naldo. I forgot that was him in Society. Yeah.
Yeah. So Brian Bremer, who plays Naldo, Christopher Wolfe, who plays Vin, Mr. Pitt from Seinfeld, who plays Professor Dorn. They all talk about it like it's high art. It's so funny to watch this behind the scenes thing. And Mr. Belvedere's own Michelle Matheson, who plays Maggie.
Oh, see, a lot of these were lost on me. I did not know that's who a lot of these folks are. I knew Ian Abercrombie, who plays Professor Dorn. I didn't know him from Seinfeld. I knew him as the old wise man from Army of Darkness.
Yes, there is that.
And,
that too.
Animation fans might recognize him as the voice of Darth Sidious in the Clone Wars TV show. I didn't realize he had such a long legacy with doing that. But
I didn't know he did that either.
Did you see who was originally cast in the Professor Dorn
part?
part?
Oh, my goodness. I
don't know if I believe this is true.
I read this trivia, too. How fucking glorious would it be if Donald Sutherland played this role? I'll tell you what, man. If Donald Sutherland played that role, these would not be simulated sex scenes.
No, exactly. They get chased around by a little murderer in a red coat.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Rena's being played by Julie Christie. It's really weird.
I never put that together. Oh my god, yeah, that would have been wild. I mean, I don't know what was Sutherland doing around this time. He was doing like that Puppet Masters movie. Oh, whoa, weird. Okay, he was doing a rival Puppet Masters movie. I wonder if that's.
I wonder if he has some connection. I don't remember hearing any stories about him in Charles Band's book or in It Came from the Video Aisle, but maybe there was.
No.
Donald Sutherland, you know what? He's like 87, 88 years old. Probably not long for this world. That's going to be a sad one. He's a cool dude.
He's a very distinctive performer. Apparently a little prickly in real life, but a very distinctive actor, very interesting performer. And it would have made for an interesting movie. I want to take a Morgan Fairchild minute real quick because she is one of those actresses that I have always known who she is somehow. Like anytime she pops up screen, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Morgan Fairchild. I never understood how I knew her or what she was famous for. And until like just watching this now and looking through her history, I'm like, oh, okay, she was on Dallas and Falcon Crest. These are shows that were massive and like super important to 80s culture, but I never watched a second of any of them.
Yeah, she had her turns on primetime soaps. She was also on General Hospital. The funny thing though is that like sometimes things are just so ubiquitous in the zeitgeist and culture. Like I basically equated Morgan Fairchild with Falcon Crest, and then I looked and I realized like she was only on Falcon Crest for one season.
Yeah, it seems like she wasn't on Dallas very long either, but she's obviously a striking woman and she puts out a certain authority. I think I knew her mostly as like Chandler's mom on Friends. That's kind of like my most sustained. Maybe she was on like a Pee Wee's Playhouse or something when I was little, and that's where I knew her. But she has kind of always been around, and she seems like she's down to make fun of herself.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Pee Wee's Big Adventure. Also, she's got a little scene at the end.
Oh,
of that.
that's a great scene with James Brolin.
Fantastic.
Yeah, she
Mr.
was.
Harmon.
She was just PW. Yeah, she was just like a beauty queen. She was one of the 10 most beautiful women in the world by Harper's Bazaar, and so yeah, she was just as like a really hot star from the turn of the 70s to the 80s, it seemed.
Yeah,
and she was Jane Fonda's stand-in for Barbarella.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know that.
Which is a pretty cool piece of trivia. But yeah, I always just thought equated her with like a primetime soap person. And so that the time that Pee-wee's Big Adventure would have been coming out, that's perfect. Because it's like you cast, you have James Brolin of, Westworld and Hotel and Marcus Welby fame sort of washed up already at that point. And then you've got this soap actress with her huge teased hair. And it just makes complete sense. And I think that's sort of indicative of what's weird about this movie is everything seems oddly dated. Like this does not feel like a 1993 shot movie. This feels like a 1984 shot movie.
Well, I mean, I think you're wrong about that because this took place in the year 2019, the far off, distant future year. So this wasn't the past; it was the retro future. All right, it was just so far ahead of the curve.
Well, they're very serendipitous that they chose to start it pre-COVID. Is all I have to say, because we could have got a very different movie if they came.
Yeah, they narrowly squeaked through that one. Yeah, I want to give a quick plot synopsis of this movie. Not that it super matters, but the title is a bit of a misnomer because they are they are technically from the year 2000 in that they were born in the year 2000, but the movie takes place in the beginning in 2019. And so the future has now been completely, the world has been completely overtaken by corporations. Oh, commentary. That has replaced all forms of government.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. But that was the same experience I had. I was like, what is with this commentary about the corporation taking over your personal credit score? I'm like, am I listening to like the Alex Jones show?
Yeah, it's so funny. It does have that kind of like quirky early 90s social commentary thing kind of going on. But yeah, we never really see what the corporation is or what they actually represent. We're not going too deep into that. The only thing we need to know is that the world is now this like homogenized, like well-run machine, and sex has been outlawed. So all reproduction is done through test tubes, and the teens that have resulted from this after 19 years are being kind of bred to be asexual, but unfortunately they are anything but that. They're in fact horny teens, which works out well for them when their stuffy Professor Dorn reveals himself to be a member of the radical underground, aka he's a hippie with a peace symbol tattoo on his chest. And he sends them back in time to 1994 so that he can stop a woman named Camilla Swales from initiating this chain of events that'll lead to this legislator. She's like a uptight Christian conservative who's running a girls' school. So here's where we get the biggest problem with this plot. This is a sex comedy in which the two male actors have to be in drag the entire thing. So basically, we are removing a lot of the situations that would lead to like sexual hijinks because they're supposed to be pretending to be girls the entire time. So we're already removing the potential for them to break out into spontaneous sex scenes. That's your red flag number one.
Well, Steve, I mean, you're acting as if there weren't just oodles of spontaneous sex scenes and bosom buddies.
Oh, well, of course. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. and Some Like It Hot, of course, was...
Yep, just nothing but hardcore penetration and Some Like It Hot. You might be thinking, listener, if you've never seen this movie, this sounds like a weird sex comedy reimagining of a low-stakes Terminator.
Well, you would not be disappointed by the revelation of Lex 9000, a guy who looks like Tom Arnold and sounds like, Tom Arnold. Yeah, because he's trying to do an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression, but it is not landing.
Oh, no, he's enunciating. He's trying to do Austrian, but he's hitting his enunciation so weird. He sounds like JFK from Clone High. When he talks, he also
I'll be back.
Yeah, that's there is an "I'll be back" in here. There's so many little stupid stingers in it, but there's also the fact that two things about this. One, this actor is 31 years old. Yeah. When they were filming, which is crazy, and I don't know if he's supposed to be sexy, if Morgan Fairchild is supposed to be attracted to him, but they couldn't have found a more conventionally attractive person. This guy looks like Dan Blocker.
He's just like a wide man. Like I'm not trying to like denigrate him or anything, but he looks like he just works like in a factory or something. You know, he's just kind of a dude, and the movie kind of hinges on him sexually seducing our frigid headmistress, because all problems can be solved by having sex with women.
My favorite thing about this guy, or I'm sorry, not guy, I meant to say about this cyborg. Yes, I mean, he is a cyborg. I no disrespect at all to the Lex 500. There's a great thing where he just looks like a human, but he has a leather jacket on because clearly Terminator 2 was a big hit 2 years earlier. But there's this hilarious thing where there's this Foley work happening where every time he turns his hips slightly or turns his neck slightly, there's just someone off camera making a like there's no indication. You never see like a metal plate or anything, or like his alloy skeleton from, I mean, there's a way to do it cheap. You can show something like put like a baking pan under his shirt and cut the shirt open and put some little doop knobs on it or something. But no, this is just a man walking around in a leather jacket. And I'm not going to lie, his introduction, I legitimately laughed out loud.
Oh yeah, it is funny that they're just going there at all for such like an obvious lazy joke, and the fact that they put the button on it by having him actually saying "I'll be back" is pretty hilarious. I mean, I think we should talk a little bit about the sex scenes in this movie, because hey, that's what people are coming to this movie for, right? That's what you're here for. Well, first of all, I want to say shout out the real MVP of this movie, and that is whatever intern they put in charge of running that fog machine. Because, man, they went nuts. They went absolutely ham with that fog machine. In some cases, like, the fog is completely overtaking the actors on scene, so it's doing its job and then some. But all of the sex in this movie takes place as, like, fantasy sequences, except for one, I guess, which is, like, when Vin reveals himself to actually be a man and to one of the sexy schoolgirls, and she just kind of doesn't blink.
Samantha Cummings?
Yeah, she just goes with it. She's immediately into it.
It is weird because they set the precedent that these are sort of asexual people who are supposed to be asexual, but who are prone to these sexual fantasies. Like you have Vin and I almost said Nando. That's not true. Naldo and Vin, who are, or it's Vin at least, I think, who has a fantasy of Rena in the classroom. And then, it's like they get these steamy scenes, the saxophones playing, the fog machine's going, and then you have this like quick cut back to reality.
Yeah.
But there's nothing really different leading into the scene with Vin and Samantha Cummings. And so it
No.
is weird because you think to yourself like, oh, I guess maybe this is a fantasy too, because this is his Sarah Connor. This is basically the woman he's going back to try to find as well. We would consider, I guess we can consider Camila to be the John Connor of this movie.
Sure. Yeah, I guess. If the Terminator's mission was to go back and bang John Connor, yeah.
Oh, well, listen, if you see me taking notes right now, it's not for any particular reason. But
I'm glad that's the reason your wrist is moving.
That's fair.
No,
That's
yeah.
fair. I think it is really hard to tell though in that scene, because the scene starts, it goes on for 12 minutes, and then it cuts to the neck like later on, and I was still convinced after about 17 minutes that it was going to be presented as a fantasy, but no, it's just he's back in drag again now, and she's hiding him from the not Terminator, the Lex 5000, who's looking for him. So it was a little weird sort of break in continuity.
Yeah, it's almost like this movie isn't very well made. Yeah, I don't know. I think we found the one plot hole in this movie.
Well, there it is. There's the flaw.
No, but like, yeah, all of these are very like, it'll transition basically to an entirely different film stock. It looks totally different. It looks totally out of nowhere whenever they're going to these sex scenes. And one of the most hilariously inept moments in this that made me laugh really hard is when the two guys in drag are watching a couple of girls shower, and then they cut away from that so that they could fantasize about two different girls showering. I'm like, what is wrong with these two? What's wrong with that? They're totally fine. Look at them naked. What are you doing? Who are these other women? Why do we need to imagine them?
Yeah, I felt kind of bad in the moment for those two women. They're kind of like, well, are you going to come in or what? And they're like, no, we have colds. And then they're just fantasizing about two completely different women. And it is very funny. But like I said, I think this is the dumbest thing I'm ever going to say. There's sort of a tonal problem in this movie where it can't balance the humor and the sexiness. And I think it's hard to tell what they're playing for laughs and what they're playing as sincere sometimes.
Yeah, and like, again, to be clear about like, this movie notwithstanding, that is a difficult needle to thread, like making something funny and sexy. That's a difficult like tightrope to balance on.
Well, it's not successful very often. And I will say this. They make a point of saying in the beginning that it's consensual sex. And you know what? Immediately this movie has a leg up on Porky's. Immediately this movie has a leg up on Revenge of the Nerds. I'm sorry. I know there are people my age who are going to claim that those are classics. I appreciate the politics of this movie more than I appreciate the politics of those movies. And I don't want to use superlatives like better, because we're talking about Torchlight. We're talking about test tube teens from the year 2000 versus big tentpole studio movies that made a ton of money that are more competently made. But you know what? Fuck Porky's, fuck Revenge of the Nerds, and don't totally fuck this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually argue this is almost I would say Porky's is borderline as inept as this movie, but this one is a little bit more likable at least. I was largely just kind of like, for a 75-minute movie, I was checking my watch a lot. I was kind of just like, all right, well, the sex scenes aren't really moving the needle for me one way or the other. The plot isn't interesting, and so we're just kind of stuck with these like cheap production values and kind of like bad actors, and so like it kind of just left me like, all right, well, this is just a big nothing.
Yeah, it's really oddly paced. It's like the premise is introduced really early in the movie, and it gets going right away, and then the denouement is about the last 5 minutes of the movie, and in between all of that, it's just stretched out with these silly set pieces and hijinks and elongated sex scenes, and it really has no flow. It is a long 75 minutes, I will say. You feel it. You
Yeah.
feel the runtime in this one. And I think also just I do, like you said with the nostalgia earlier, I have a soft spot for it because
Sure.
I watched so many of these, quote unquote raunchy sex comedies because they were readily available on premium cable channels in the late 80s and the early 90s. But I just couldn't get over like how childish some of the comedy stuff was. Like when you have Ian Abercrombie trying to seduce Morgan Fairchild and all of a sudden he's just like talking like Dracula.
Yeah, what was that?
Yeah, he's doing like a weird Bela Lugosi, and then
I think he was trying to do like an Italian lover or something, but it just, yeah, you're right. It sounded like Dracula.
It was an Italian lover or a Pepe Le Pew. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
What he was really trying to do. But then she essentially hits him with a frying pan, and he turns into like Roger Rabbit for a second, and there's like stars and birds chirping in the Foley, and it was just really silly. You know what there's a lot of? You talked about someone getting a real workout on the fog machine. There's a lot of slide whistle in this movie.
Yeah.
More slide whistle than I care for, if I'm being honest.
Very like a Benny Hill kind of level of slapstickery, which is not sexy to me. Yeah. And I feel like this is a movie that kind of fails on its mission statement, like if it's meant to be titillating, it's kind of not. Like, no offense to the actors who are here. They're all like very attractive physical specimens, and they've all been coated in baby oil.
Oh, I mean, especially those three bouncers at the club there. I mean,
boy, beefcakes. Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's nothing against them. They're doing what they can, but this is a movie it's a sex movie that seems largely uninterested in the sex that it's portraying, and the story itself and the jokes are not entertaining enough to really pull me through.
I will compliment one thing. Well, I don't know if this is a compliment, but I was going to say, like, Brian Bremer, who plays Naldo, he's got like a real sort of like, when you order David Hyde Pierce from Wish.com.
No, I thought he was good. I thought he genuinely he felt dialed in.
I actually liked Maggie's energy. I liked Michelle Matheson. It's a real like not another teen movie moment of where she's like losing the glasses. But I do like the fact that she doesn't get like super hot. They don't do a total Pygmalion on her where Vin and everyone else turns into a Tex Avery cartoon and starts drooling all over her. I like that they recognize like, oh no, she's nerdy, but she's attractive, and she ends up getting Naldo.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought they were charming enough, and I think people, you said in that vidcast, like everybody was speaking effusively about it. And I think it's clear that they're having fun making this. I think most of the people here know what kind of movie they're in. And Charles Band even talks about that. Exploitation should not be about exploiting actors or exploiting bodies or things like that. It should be exploiting a moment, and then the sets should be fun, and the sets should be entertaining, and the sets should feel like a camaraderie. And you get a sense of that here. Like, it doesn't feel like anyone's being manipulated into doing something against their will.
You know who was having fun on this set? The costume designer who picked Naldo and Vin's outfit that they wore to the club.
That was pretty unbelievable. I want that love vest. For sure.
Somebody rated, backstage at a Color Me Bad concert.
Oh my God.
And it's so
And for
good.
the future bits, they rated the set of Roger Corman's Fantastic Four movie.
Fantastic Four, Space Mutiny.
Yeah,
it's got real vibes there. That love vest is one of my favorite, and that's another thing too. We talked about stuff that kind of pads out this runtime. Like it is MTV's The Grind for a minute, because
oh God, yeah,
he is the dancing. Vin's dancing. I don't know if this guy Christopher Wolf was just like, hey, you know what, like, I'm a fly guy. I'm a good hip hop dancer. Just leave the camera on me and let me just kind of, do my thing, because it lingers on him. And then it's just like, him and Naldo have a weird like choreographed dance routine where he's doing the worm through Naldo's legs, and there's a lot of pulsating and gyrating, and it took me back though, because if you watch video clips of the grind or other dance shows from any time between 19 late Soul Train episodes, like anything from like 88 to 95, that's
Yeah.
what people looked like dancing. There's a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of aggressive knees and elbows in
Yeah.
their dancing. And as much as we've kind of taken some of this stuff to task in a playful way, there were moments like that where I was smiling, because we're going to get to some late period full moon stuff that's going to be dated in a way that does not feel fun.
No, no. I think this movie is harmless. I think this movie is made in the spirit of fun. Like, I don't think it's particularly competently made or very good, but I think its heart is in the right place, centered directly over its crotch.
But well put.
Like that one movie poster with Gerard Butler.
I do want to know this though. So we know there was some controversy surrounding the movie after the fact as it pertains to Morgan Fairchild, who apparently wrote Charles Band a really nasty, I don't know if threatening is the right word, but just a letter ripping into him about what this movie ended up being that he has framed in an
Yeah.
office. And I just posit the question, what movie did she think she was in?
Right. And yeah, and I was trying to find some more content about what was in that letter, because this was just kind of dropped. I saw that as like a IMDb trivia fact, which we all know is rock solid. You can take that to the bank. But I was curious what the content of that was, if maybe she didn't get paid, or I don't know what, or if the movie just turned out worse than she thought it was. Maybe she thought she was doing like Vanya on 42nd Street or something. And yeah.
No, she thought, I mean, she thought she was doing essentially like okay, I'm going to say I thought she was doing a Dean Vernon. But I really think she according to the Torchlight Video Zone, she was basing her performance on Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I never saw that movie because it looked unpleasant. But yeah, that's an exploitation film from the 70s about a sexually dominant female Nazi.
Right. So I ask again, that's where you're pulling inspiration from. You're working for Torchlight Pictures, a subdivision of Full Moon, for Charlie Band. What movie did you think you were in?
I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious. Maybe there was another draft of the script that was a bit tonier, but I kind of doubt it. Well, did you have anything else to say about this movie? I think I'm about a test tube tapped out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I realized after the fact, we didn't chat beforehand about what we're Full Moon featuring, or any of that stuff, or what's what's making.
Well, here let's jump into that. Let's add this movie to our ongoing rankings to see where it lands in the 5 movies that we've watched so far. I'm going to predict that our list is going to stay identical for this one. So far, we both have the exact same list. Right now, it's Trancers at number 1, Puppet Master at a close number 2, Subspecies at 3, Evil Bong at 4. For me, I'm putting this below Subspecies, above Evil Bong.
Me too, man.
I think I still prefer this to Evil Bong.
Yeah,
I feel like we're still on the same
sync.
page.
I prefer this to Evil Bong, and I may never revisit this, but I do think it's largely harmless. And I, like you said, and I think it made me think of all of these raunchy sex comedies that are so unpleasant, that are so misogynistic, that are so just gross when you watch them now. And I don't really get that vibe here. I mean, I think about Porky's, I think about Revenge of the Nerds, I think about Zapped.
Yeah.
And it's like this movie, I sort of appreciate that we have a raunchy sex comedy that doesn't have the amount of unconsensual sex in it. So it gains some points in my estimation for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, real quick, we're going to transition to talk about what else we're full moon featuring. But I just wanted to shout out this is the first time we've recorded, I think, since our feed has been set up, our Instagram,
That's
our
right. Here
email,
we
all
go.
of that. So you can find us if you want to send us a message and everything. You can send us to puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Instagram at puppetmasters_castlefreaks. We've already had some amazing support coming to that Facebook page or that Instagram page. So thank you everybody so much. We've had some full moon superstars like following us now. So that's really exciting, and hopefully we can get them on sometime to talk about them.
Yeah, I'm thrilled with how quickly the Instagram launch has pulled in a bunch of followers, and a bunch of them are, fans of the company, actors and filmmakers and people who worked for the company. And I can't wait to, reach out and try to get some of them to come and chat with us about some of the movies that we're going to be hitting in the future. But lots of love already for Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks on the Instagram. And yeah, so we're up and live. And if you have questions, comments, like we always say, rate and review the show wherever you get podcasts. A nice, if you think we're fun to listen to and you like that people are diving in and talking about these movies in a market that's not, hugely saturated with this kind of stuff, leave a 5-star review and a nice comment, and it'll just help us get more exposure and get out to more people, and so we can keep this thing going and hopefully pull in some more high profile guests and just have an amazing time talking about this company that we really love and respect, no matter how much fun we might poke at some of the titles.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna be honest about these movies and about our honest appraisals of them and our reactions to them. But I hope the people listening who might have been involved in them don't take that particularly personally. We have nothing but love for Full Moon as a label and for this whole venture as an undertaking. So we're excited to get to talk to people about that. Also, what else do you have Full Moon featuring right now? What else is going on in your life that you'd like to talk about?
So I am Full Moon featuring this week. Nothing in particular in terms of like an item, although I do keep accumulating some pretty cool records that I'm really excited about. But I did just get back from Detroit, Michigan, which was a city that in my 42 years of life I had never visited until just now. I went out there for a wedding, had a blast, really enjoyed the city, went to a bunch of cool places. So I've got a really nice high opinion of Detroit as a city, and I can't wait to go back and spend some more time there.
Well, Barbarian made it look lovely, so I definitely wanted to check it out after watching that. Yeah, that's awesome. I think we've both been traveling around a little bit lately. I went to San Antonio this weekend for the first time ever. That's a city I will also recommend. I had a good time down in San Antonio. Very lovely. And a lot of good food, a lot of good people. That was a really good time. Otherwise, and this is going to lock me, I think you'll be able to pinpoint the exact moment we're recording this episode by these two recommendations. But I just watched the final episode of Succession and the third season of I Think You Should Leave, which dropped today. So I've been inundated in some of my favorite TV.
You're really time stamping this a certain time.
Yeah, you'll be able to zero in exactly where we were when we recorded this episode on Test Tube Teens from the year 2000.
So I have not watched season 3 of I Think You Should Leave yet because my wife will divorce me if I watch it without her.
Oh, fair.
And I did watch the Succession finale, though, and what a finale. Yeah. I actually almost want to go back and start the entire series again. I loved it that much, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe it'll come up next week when we're talking about the next film in our roster. And that is going to be, let me just open up my magical spreadsheet to find out exactly what we're going to be talking about. I'm not filling, you're filling. We're going to be talking about the movie Piranha Women. This is from 2022, directed by Fred Olen Ray, one of the more recent movies, probably the most recent movie we're going to be watching. I know nothing about Piranha Women.
Yeah,
So we're digging into
you
it.
were going into that spreadsheet, and I had my fingers crossed here that we were going to be taking a trip back to some classic era Full Moon or some Empire, but no, we're going to go with a 2022 feature. So we are doing the latest stage of Full Moon right now. All right, okay.
Absolutely.
Well,
And then after that, I can guarantee something from the heyday of a full moon in the 90s.
well,
So
that's
I'll
good.
tease that out for you. We're gonna have a heyday episode there. But hey, maybe Piranha Women belongs in the echelon. We don't know. We haven't seen it.
I'm sort of ready to mark it as sixth on my on my scorecard here. But nope. You know what? I don't want to go into it with a negative attitude.
Yeah. Open minds, open jaws, full of teeth, devouring cows. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. We will see you next time for Piranha Women. Peace out.